Live from the Glasgow Electric Plant Board, Glasgow Wants to Know. With your host, Mr. Uhel Barrickman.
Welcome. We are fortunate tonight in having as our guest the Commonwealth's Attorney for the 43rd Judicial District, consisting of Metcalfe and Barron County, and his assistant, Karen Davis. We had originally intended to talk about drugs, and that's what we're going to talk about mainly, but since they've had a busy day and there was an unfortunate incidents, several probably unfortunate incidents around the Finney community, and I realize, Phil, that there's little or nothing you can say about it now, but if there is anything you can say.
I can talk about it briefly. There were 2 dead bodies found by the Sheriff's Department responding to a 911 call along with ambulance personnel and the coroner, and the body of Shane Smith was found in his residence, and the body of a Joey Sowers was found in a nearby residence, both dead of a gunshot wound. The bodies are being transported, probably have already arrived in Louisville at the state medical examiner's offices, where autopsy will be performed. Detective Terry Harris is heading the investigation of the Sheriff's Department and has taken a number of witness statements, and there will be others taken, and hopefully we will shortly be able to have some theory as to the motive and the manner of these 2 deaths.
The local paper reported there was also a kidnapping, yet the news on Channel 13 didn't mention that.
There was a kidnapping, and fortunately the victim of that kidnapping was released alive.
Now, as I stated, we're going to talk about drugs. And my first question to you, Phil, and incidentally we'll get to you too, don't worry about it. Is there a drug problem in the 43rd Judicial District?
Mr. Barrickman, there's a drug problem in the 43rd Judicial District and in all judicial districts. If there was one thing that I could change that would lower the crime rate all across the board, would be the abuse of drugs and alcohol. And Barron, Metcalfe County is not unlike other districts across the state. A healthy majority of all crimes we see are either directly or indirectly related to drugs. And that would range from the cold checks cases we get, to the child abuse cases we get, to the assaults, even to the homicides. There's very frequently some drug or alcohol abuse that's related to the tragedy.
Do you find that there are more and more families using drugs, illegal drugs, in the home?
I'm sure that it is, I've never really thought about that, but I know it's being used somewhere. What we most often see is people get stopped for traffic violations and are in possession of drugs, or there is a crime that causes the police to respond to a residence, and quite often illegal drugs are present or have quite obviously been used, and when blood or urine is drawn, we find it in the systems of most often the perpetrator and sometimes in the victim as well, when we're looking at domestic abuse type situations.
And that's one I was wondering about, Karen, in these domestic abuse type cases. Do you usually find, or I guess usually is the wrong word, do you sometimes find that they are generated by drug problems?
Yes, sir. Some of my primary responsibilities include the cases that involve either child abuse or abuse against women in a domestic violence situation. And I would say in the majority of those, there has been a pattern of not only abuse between the perpetrator and the victim, but a pattern of substance abuse on the part of the perpetrator, and oftentimes is under the influence, which certainly does not excuse the behavior, but we do see that pattern existing.
And then that would indicate that you're using illegal drugs in the home.
Yes, sir, and oftentimes, because we see that pattern in those type of cases, we consider that when we talk about the resolution of the cases, and oftentimes treatment becomes an issue.
Now, while we're on the subject of homes, do you encounter abuse of prescription drugs? And if so, what's done about that? Either one of you can answer that one.
Yeah, we see it very often. What we typically see is doctor shopping, people who may have a legitimate medical problem that get a prescription for pain medication, let's say, from Dr. A, then later the same day go to Dr. B and Dr. C and Dr. E, and they end up with such a volume of pain medication that the suspicion is sometimes that they are actually selling it, or if they're not selling it, they are certainly abusing it themselves. And the way that is caught, there's a computer that monitors controlled substances, and all pharmacies furnish this information to this computer, and the computer generates names of people who seem to have gone to too many doctors for the same prescription, and then those cases are referred to us for prosecution.
What has been your success as far as victims concerned?
From my memory, 100%. But what we generally do, these are people, unless it's a clear case of that the volume of medicine is so much that they're obviously trafficking, we generally work out a penalty that includes a guilty plea and probation on the condition that they have no further violation and also participate successfully in a drug rehab program.
Now, Karen, he brought up a subject that confuses the public an awful lot. What's the difference between parole and permitting someone to be under the supervision of the church, but not, the court, but not be sent to the penitentiary?
I guess you would say there's three types of, you have your diversionary program. That's when someone has been charged with a felony and they plead guilty to the felony charge, but because of the lack of a criminal history, that they have no prior felony, they might qualify for our diversion program. And ultimately what would happen, they plead guilty to the felony, they're on a diversion period for say 2 to 5 years, they're monitored. That might include random drug testing, that might include having to obtain a GED, having to maintain employment. At the end of that diversionary period, the charge, if ever looked up again on this person, would show diverted dismissed. So they could later answer job applications truthfully as saying, I'm not a convicted felon, that it was diverted dismissed. So there's some advantage to those who do not have a prior felony conviction to enter into the diversionary program. That's different than a probation resolution. On probation, once again, they're felony or felony and misdemeanor charge. They plead guilty to the charges as stated, and they might be placed on probation for 2, 3, 4 years. Once again, supervised with all kinds of conditions. They may have curfews, maintain employment, seek education, seek training. But that felony does not go away. It would still remain on their record even at the end of their probationary period. And both of those are even different than parole. Parole that they have pled guilty, they were finally sentenced, say to the penitentiary, and they meet with the parole board who makes the decision based on good time credit and how they have behaved in the penitentiary, and they might be placed on pre-release or parole.
What about shock probation?
Shock probation is also another form of the same types of things we're talking about. In that case, once again, you're typically in those cases talking about first-time offenders or those defendants that are relatively new to the criminal system. My understanding, it was devised in a way so that these folks who are new to the criminal system go in, get a taste and experience what the penitentiary or what jail time would be like, and hopefully that provides a shock to them, shock probation, and helps them see the errors of their ways and to give them a second chance so they can file a motion for shock probation with the judge after serving a relatively few number of days. It could be 60 days, 90 days, 120 days, based on the crime involved, and perhaps give those folks that don't have a criminal history a second chance.
And how does that affect their record?
That would stay on their record just like a probation. The felony would still show up, but like I said, it gives them a second chance with their family or with their job, and sometimes includes treatment, getting a GED, other conditions.
You mentioned a subject that, if we have time, I would like to get into later, and that is treatment programs which are available around here. And I know there are some, but again, I don't think the public generally knows about the availability of these treatment programs. Let's talk about schools a minute. I know, as you know, Phil, that there are problems in the schools because my firm represents school districts.
Correct.
Is it getting better or worse?
It's hard to say, Mr. Barrickman. It seems to run in cycles, and I don't know that that means that at times it's better and at times it's worse, or whether we just catch them sometimes and other times do not. We have, and the Glasgow Police Department has cooperated every way possible with any local school system that wants the drug dog to come to the school. I personally think that while it's, I don't want to fool myself in believing it would solve all the problems and eliminate the possibility of the kids using drugs, I think it is a deterrent, at least, to them bringing drugs to school. And school is, after all, where kids congregate and see each other day in and day out, and if they don't bring it to school, then other kids are that much less likely to be exposed to it. But I'm not so gullible as to believe it's the be-all and end-all.
Now, the reverse of cooperation, how have the schools cooperated with the law enforcement agencies in your office?
I think reasonably well. We've had some school districts that actively seek the drug dog, and other school districts that haven't.
Now, what about the age group of people dealing in drugs in the school?
Of course, the kids in school generally get out when they're 18 or 19. We find that the older they are, the more likely they are to be dealing. We've recently experienced, it's been in the Glasgow paper, it seems, a rash of 18-year-olds that have been caught trafficking. In today's paper, there was a fairly significant cocaine possession arrest last night involving kids, some under 18, some right around 18 or 19, and of course they're innocent until proven guilty, but some of these kids, we've had previous charges against them. In fact, some of them have charges pending right now, and you know, we know in fact that they are selling cocaine and possessing large quantities of cocaine. So it's a a big problem and a major concern to law enforcement. And I do want to compliment the Glasgow Police Department, the Kentucky State Police, have had recently some very successful undercover operations. These are difficult and take a lot of work and last a long time. And you know, when they get in the court system, we do everything we can to see that the traffickers get severe punishment.
Karen, what about the middle schools? See any evidence of drugs there?
Unfortunately, you do, not as much as at the high school. But I believe that, unfortunately, it is reaching younger and younger children. As Mr. Patton said, for the most part, I think school officials have become more aware, and we have good counselors and vice principals and different people there available who are making a greater effort. But unfortunately, yeah, it does reach down in the middle schools.
Another feature that I often get questions about is how is it that one group of juveniles may be treated one way in the court system and another group or another individual, each one of them being under 18, is treated another way. And of course I know, but the public generally doesn't. You want to comment on that, Phil?
Karen, let me defer. Our office doesn't prosecute juveniles unless they are commit an offense involving the use of a firearm or are youthful offenders and commit B felonies and have a prior record. Karen, however, don't want to throw you the, the hot potato, but the way I first met and saw Karen was to see the excellent job that she was doing as an assistant county attorney and the praise that she was receiving from police officials and juvenile experts for the job she was doing, so I stole her away. So she has some familiarity with that, with the juvenile court, beyond what I have, so I'll lateral the ball.
Okay. Just to some degree, as we do adults, based on how many times we've seen this juvenile, based on whether or not this juvenile has a prior criminal history, the juvenile system was originally enacted to not provide punishment so much for these juveniles, to provide them with a second chance if it's been a lack of family supervision or support, if it's been peer pressure, and exactly what is going on with this person. So in juvenile court, I guess we took a little broader view of what was going on in this young person's home and surroundings, and how we could change that and hopefully change them before that behavior got too set in stone. But as far as the outcome or what we would seek in those cases, as far as treating one juvenile differently from another juvenile, how many times we've seen that person in the system, whether they seem sincere, whether they just got caught with the wrong crowd, or whether they were really criminal intents involved.
Felony crime, normally.
Yes.
Now, who makes the final decision as to whether they'll be tried as juvenile or be tried as an adult?
There's two ways that happens. The district judge, if it is a case where they are what's called a youthful offender, and in order to be a youthful offender, it's someone who has committed a felony and has a record of a prior felony, and the felony that they've committed has to be a serious felony, a B-level felony or greater. Then the judge has a hearing and decides whether the case ought to be transferred to circuit court as a youthful offender. That's the prerogative of the district judge. There is a mandatory transfer law if a juvenile commits a crime involving the use of a firearm. Then the statute does not leave the juvenile court judge any discretion. It's mandatorily transferred to circuit court to be tried as an adult. And we've had 2 or 3 of those since I've been Commonwealth Attorney.
Now, since we're on the subject of juveniles, what is the reaction of the parent when his or her child is charged with either selling or using drugs?
It varies from parent to parent. From my experience, the parents who are outraged by it and who want to make sure their child is punished, those children tend to do better. If they get probated because of their youth, they tend to, in all likelihood, be more successful in their probation. The ones that the parents come in and claim their child was framed or whatever, and I've never seen anybody framed. I hear about it all the time. It's been my experience that the ones that complain about the police instead of about the behavior of their child, those children don't perform as well, and if granted probation, usually turn up with a dirty drug screen or arrested for something else in a very short period of time and end up back in the system.
One reason I asked the question was, in my experience with disciplinary hearings in the school system, you have a majority of the parents that come in defend the child. He couldn't have done it or she couldn't have done it. Somebody is trying to influence them, or they don't like them and they want to get even with them, and any number of reasons. And I was wondering if that was still true when they committed a major offense.
It's identical. What I perceive and what Karen perceives is identical to what you saw, and I guess it goes back to the discipline that exists, or lack of discipline that exists in the home, seems to translate out into criminal behavior.
Now we're into another subject that we could talk about for a long time. We won't, but do you see any improvement recently in discipline in the home?
I haven't noticed any. Maybe Karen could comment on that.
I don't know. I think it would be a generalization. I don't know that I've been around long enough to say whether it is improved or not improved. I would say that there seems to be a lot of lack of supervision in the home, not only in these drug cases, but in our child abuse cases, be it verbal or physical. And I would say lack of supervision in the home and would be a great problem, but whether it's actually increased or decreased, I couldn't say.
It came about, I think, or the beginning of the lack of disciplines in the home came about as a result of my generation returning from the war. And we were subjected to discipline before the war and during the war. The Depression caused it and so forth. And we thought that we should loosen up a bit as far as the children were concerned, and it soon got out of hand. And I think generally it's gotten worse instead of better.
That would be my observation. I guess I didn't think so at the time, but I was blessed with parents that my father could just look at me and that was sufficient to get me to straighten up my act. And you know, I've tried to discipline my children, and up to now at least they've turned out pretty well, but I think that's a combination of good luck and good kids and hopefully decent parenting.
Yeah, I agree that it's a combination of things. There is some amount of luck, but also it's my observation that children that come out of homes where there was discipline, they turn out better
I agree with that.
Now, a recent innovation, as far as I'm concerned, drug courts. I know we don't have a drug court here
Right.
in this judicial district. There is a drug court in Warren County and several other counties in the state. Would you like to enlighten us about drug courts, Karen?
Well, the drug courts were brought about in an effort to best address the problem of drug dependency and crimes committed involving drugs. And one of the reasons were the recidivism, the repetitive nature we see of a lot of the same faces over and over and over again. And to rather than just to punish the behavior, especially if it's that they are a user versus a trafficker, if you have someone with an actual true addiction, that you would have a charge and you would finish that case, and yet they would be unable to break the cycle. They would be going out in the community, they would be hanging out with the same folks and living the same lifestyle, and lo and behold, you'd see them back in court again in a matter of weeks or months. So my understanding of when the drug courts were enacted was to better help address this problem and to break the cycle that you see in the folks with addictions over and over. And a lot of the features of the drug court program, as far as random screening, drug testing, highly supervised, require them to get additional training, a GED or vocational training, and some of the same measures that we actually try to implement in Barron Circuit Court. Although we don't actually have a drug court, we also implement some of these same features.
Now, where there is a drug court, what is the jurisdiction insofar as the type drugs that, does it depend on the nature of the drug, or does it depend on the individual?
Mr. Barrickman, it's my understanding it's the individual. It has to be a person who is charged with a possession type crime. In other words, he's addicted, but he hadn't broke into a house, he hadn't robbed anybody, he hadn't assaulted anybody. And those are people that we try to give them similar type treatment if we can in Barron County. Judge Dickinson and I went to a training program on drug courts. The drug courts that do exist are quite expensive to operate, so we have attempted to take some of what we thought were good features of drug court and use them in the Barron Circuit Court. For example, we're one of the few courts in Kentucky that, and Judge Dickinson always makes remaining drug and alcohol free a condition of being out on bond for any kind of charge that is even remotely related to the abuse of drugs or alcohol. And so those people, even though they hadn't been convicted, we can cause them to be randomly drug screened, and if they turn up dirty, we can ask that their bond be revoked. And the advantage of this is that when it comes time to sentencing these people, if we didn't have that, everyone, when it comes time to be sentenced, says, oh, I just want to get off drugs. Well, because of the docket, even though we have a very efficient court, it's still several months. So with this bond condition, we get them into addressing their addiction problem sooner rather than later. And then by the time that they come up for sentencing, if they have in fact passed a number of random drug screens, in fact gone to a drug rehab program, and we'll arrange for them to go to Park Place or wherever. If they've done all of that, and it's one of these cases where the person is just charged with possession, and they've proven to the court that they are making a serious effort, then we let them enter the diversion program where they won't end up with a felony record. But after they've been diverted for, say, possession of cocaine, they continue to be randomly checked. if they turn up dirty, then they are sentenced for their crime. So we have had not perfect success, but a reasonable success with mimicking drug court, but at no cost to the taxpayer.
Does the judge of a drug court have jurisdiction in any other?
Yes. From my understanding, this seminar that we went to, the circuit judge in, say, Kenton County, Warren County, actually has a division of his court that's the drug court, and he is the judge of that court. Unlike a family court that has a judge that is only the judge of the family court.
But that same judge has jurisdiction the same as any other circuit judge over both civil and criminal matters.
That's correct.
That's what I had gathered from what I had heard and what I had read, because I noticed that Judge Noble in Fayette County has gotten considerable publicity about her drug court, and yet I knew that she had regular jurisdiction of a circuit judge.
The typical person that ends up in, I guess, what would be the Barron Circuit Court rough equivalent of drug court is someone who's driving down the road and the license plate is expired. Police pull him over, notice a pipe sitting there. Turns out it's a crack pipe. So the guy who was stopped because his license plate was expired ends up with a charge of possession of cocaine, which is a felony. That person had committed no other crime other than he or she was in possession of cocaine, methamphetamine, and those are the kinds of people that may otherwise be employed, and we try to give them every opportunity to beat that problem without a felony conviction. But it's up to them. If they don't make that effort to beat that problem, then they end up with a felony conviction.
What seems to be the major drug in the area now insofar as enforcement's concerned?
What we're seeing, and that tends to run in cycles, for a while it was a rash of methamphetamine or crank or speed. Now almost all the arrests are cocaine, particularly crack cocaine, and that is a highly addictive substance, as is crank. One or two hits of crack cocaine, from what I've read and been told, you're addicted.
From where, insofar as your office's investigation is concerned, where is the cocaine coming from? How's it get in here?
From what we've seen, and there have been some fairly big arrests, but not as big as what the police and state police and Glasgow police hope to get, but from what we've seen, it seems to come into Barron County from Hart County, Monroe County, or Warren County. Seems to be the routes that it comes in.
Well, I know I've read about there are certain distribution centers for it.
Yeah.
And I was wondering,
and that seems to vary. For a while, most all of it we were seeing was coming from Hart County. And now I don't seem to be seeing much from Hart County. Last what we observed, the arrest that was in the paper today, that was from Warren County. Then there was a period that most all seemed to be coming in from Monroe County.
what about marijuana? I've had people to tell me rather recently that in most of these malls, if you go to them at night, you can smell marijuana.
Well, I try not to go to the malls. So.
Well, I do too, but I've had people tell me that recently, that it's very evident that you've got a lot of people in these malls that are smoking marijuana. I don't mean inside the buildings, I'm talking about in the parks.
Doesn't surprise me. I don't know how many hundreds of arrests we have every year for marijuana possession. Usually the same situation, police stop a car that is being operated erratically. Marijuana, for some reason, the legislature has treated it differently than other drugs. For example, possession of cocaine, first offense is a D felony, then it becomes a higher felony, then a higher felony. Marijuana, the way the statute is written, you can be arrested every day for under 8 ounces of marijuana, and it never becomes a felony unless you're selling it. So I don't think the legislature has been quite as aggressive as perhaps they should in marijuana, while and this sounds ridiculous, and is, first offense possession of marijuana rolling papers is a misdemeanor. The second offense is a felony, where you can get marijuana, as I say, 50 convictions of possession of marijuana, and it never becomes a felony unless you're selling it.
Does sound strange.
Yes, it is strange.
Of course, there are those who advocate treating it as a tobacco and not making it a drug. You have any?
I'm opposed to that, just from, and I'm not an expert, but from my experience, marijuana seems to be the portal of entry into drug abuse. And I think if you can close off that portal, then it's less likely that these kids or young people would also decide to experiment with cocaine or methamphetamine. And we often find marijuana, I would say almost invariably, if you find cocaine, you will also find marijuana.
In your judgment, how much is grown in Barron County?
Well, I've seen quite a bit. When the state police fly the area, there's been a time or two that I've gotten to go, and they seem to find a lot. And the way that it can be hidden in the middle of corn crops, in the middle of forests, I would guess that the state police find a small percentage of what is grown.
Now, of that you find, what is the rate of finding who is growing it?
Very small, very low, because it's rarely grown in a way that it is obvious that the landowner is growing it. We've had a few cases where it is obvious and they are prosecuted. The landowner has the chemicals to grow it. You can see a path going from the house down to where the crop is, but that is the exception rather than the rule. And it's very easy for marijuana to be surreptitiously grown on people's land. In fact, a few years ago, somebody made an anonymous call that I had some marijuana out, and I live out in the country. And darn if I didn't have over in the woods. And I'm sure somebody planted it and deliberately called in and reported it was there, and whoever called in, they were right, it was there.
Well, that I can understand. But what about the marijuana that's grown in cornfields, where you've got your farmer and your landowner that is growing the corn?
Well, those we have had some successful prosecutions of. And because we've been able to prove that you could not possibly have tended corn without having at least stumbled across something that didn't look like corn. So there's been 5 or 6, I'm not sure the exact number, but substantial crops successfully prosecuted against either the landowner or the tenant.
Now, Karen, let's go to treatment programs that are available in this area. I'm sure in dealing with juvenile courts, a lot of them are probated on condition that they do get treatment.
Yes,
How
sir.
many we got, and where are they, and what do they do, and so forth, and cost. And, in other words, general overview of treatment programs.
Sure. Both our juvenile and our adult offenders, as we mentioned earlier, if they don't have a significant criminal history and they qualify for the diversion program, or maybe as part of their probation condition, we'll have them seek treatment. Basically, two types of treatment. There's either outpatient treatment, where they continue with their job and their family, but they go every so often and meet with a counselor. They are monitored, and they can still be subject to random drug testing. And then there's also your residential treatment programs, where you go and stay. It may be a 28-day, a 30-day program. For that period of time, you stay in that facility. You're not at home. You look at the individual as far as what you feel is appropriate. You might look at the length of the addiction, or what they are addicted to, or whatever else is going on in their life. We try to leave it up to the professionals to determine whether or not outpatient or residential treatment is appropriate for this individual and the addiction that they face. Life skills over on Happy Valley Road is typically where we send them for assessment, and if they are recommended for outpatient treatment. For our indigent defendants who cannot afford the cost of treatment themselves. So Life Skills is a facility that we often use. Park Place in Bowling Green, I think Mr. Patton mentioned earlier, is a residential setting for those who are assessed and their addiction and their circumstances call for them to be kind of away from the lifestyle they've been in and the situation they've been in. A residential setting more appropriate. There's also a Volta program over towards Hopkins County, Hopkinsville area is another residential type 28, 30-day treatment facility where they would go and stay for that period of time. And both of those facilities, to my understanding, are available either to private paying people who may have health insurance, where their health insurance would provide and pay, or for some that are like on medical cards or that type of situation. So we have also halfway houses, which sometimes are good alternatives. They may have gone to the residential treatment program for a while, and it's gotten them out of the situation. They're clean and sober for a period of time, but still not ready to really go back to their normal routine. And so halfway house, there are some in Bowling Green that we utilize also.
And do you know, or can you describe the nature of the treatment? What do they do after they get to the individual after he or she is in the facility?
I know with Park Place, I think I'm speaking correctly, there are many conditions. They may not have contact, as I said, if it's because of the lifestyle they've led or the peers they've been around. I know we've had situations where individuals might get kicked out of Park Place before the 28-day or 30-day period has completed, and that has been from a variety of things. They may not want to go to the meetings. They might be sending or receiving mail from outside influences in their old lifestyle when they've been told not to. They may be fraternizing with members of the opposite sex and not taking this seriously, that this is a treatment, this is not a dating facility or a facility to make new friends. That so I can't tell you specifically, but I know a number of infractions that we have had, and sometimes these folks have to go back a second or third time before they're taking it seriously enough to complete the program.
What does the program consist of? Any educational? And by that I don't mean normal education, I mean drug education.
Sure, certainly. One thing alluded to earlier in regard, for example, to marijuana, some folks might believe, marijuana is not a hard drug and try to categorize it differently than cocaine or methamphetamine. And I think part of, at the treatment facilities, is to explain to these folks that regardless of your drug of choice, and even marijuana can mess up your life. It's jeopardizing your relationships, for example, with your spouse, with your children. That might be a reason they're not providing discipline or supervision to their children. It's making you a danger to yourself or others, perhaps on the job. You may be a job where you're running machinery or some type of factory situation, and you're a danger to yourself and others on the road if you're driving under the influence. So information regarding what effect these different chemicals have on you and your brain, and also psychologically what effect it has when you're dealing with other people. So there's certainly informational and educational in the treatment programs.
What if he or she has a job? Is there some arrangements or treatment that can be involved and let the individual continue working?
As I said earlier, sometimes you have to just assess it on an individual situation. Sometimes if the assessor believes that outpatient treatment can be productive for this person, and we can attempt to allow them to maintain employment and live at home in that type of situation. However, it seems like typically it's this person's lifestyle. It's not just one thing in their life. And sometimes that means actually separating them from that lifestyle and intensive treatment in a residential setting. And in those occasions, folks probably sometimes do lose jobs or either have to ask their employer for some leeway. But this treatment is certainly necessary. As I said, they can be a danger to their employer.
But is there any treatment that permits them, while they're getting treatment as an outpatient, to continue their job?
If it's an outpatient situation, yes.
Now, you have mentioned several times, neither one of you can, I don't want to impose on you all the time, but you've mentioned several times, both of you have for that matter, an assessor who would assess these individuals. What's the normal training of these assessors? Who are they?
Well, the people at Life Skills have a degree, I'm not sure exactly what in, but they have the credentials that they supposedly have expertise in making that assessment. And then in addition to that, they're also interviewed by Department of Probation and Parole, who are quite expert in dealing with con men or con women, and because they day in, day out have dealt with hundreds of people. And before we decide to grant probation or diversion, or Judge Dickinson hears from Probation and Parole as well as from Life Skills, and gets a recommendation whether the guy or gal, man or woman, are a likely successful candidate for one of these probation or diversion or residential or non-residential treatment programs. And if a person has a job and doesn't have a criminal history and is only charged with a possession or use, certainly the court, probation, parole, all of us do everything we can to keep them employed unless their addiction is such that unless they're in a residential program, they're going to continue to abuse it, and in that case, they have to go in, successfully complete residential treatment, and then we look at the possibility of probation or diversion again.
So the assessors are professional people.
Correct.
Now we've talked about what I normally refer to as hard drugs, with the exception of marijuana. I don't think that's classified as a hard drug. What about alcohol? I don't think we've talked much, if any, about alcohol here.
I'd say alcohol, if I had to categorize the percentage of crimes that a drug was involved, alcohol would be the number one. And that's not just the DUIs, which everyone's familiar with, but it's the assaults, it's the homicides. We see that, in fact, Mr. Barrickman, probably at 2 or 3 times, if not greater, the rate of alcohol involvement versus cocaine or methamphetamine. It's a bigger problem.
It's a bigger problem.
It sure is.
What's being done to control that problem?
We the same kinds of programs we've been talking about, assessment, residential treatment, etc. If it's an alcohol-related offense that didn't hurt anybody, but if it's the DUIs, our office prosecutes anyone that has had 4 DUIs within 5 years, or a 3rd DUI with a blood alcohol level above a 0.18. And in the 6.5 years that I've been in office, we've never tried one of those cases that the jury in Barron County did not give the defendant the maximum sentence of 5 years in the penitentiary. And Judge Dickinson never grants probation to someone convicted of felony DUI. So they get slammed as hard as the law will permit them to be slammed. If it's a driving under the influence offense, if it's a crime such as a homicide, and we've had a few homicides where the defense was, I didn't really mean to do it, I was just big and drunk. And under the law, that can be a defense, believe it or not. But Barron County juries don't view it as a defense, and so we don't have a big tolerance for alcohol abuse or it being a crutch or an excuse for the commission of a crime.
Do you have separate programs for treatment of alcoholics?
The kinds of treatments that we were describing for drug abusers, those same precise type programs are used to address alcohol. And when I was mentioning how Judge Dickinson requires people to be drug-free during the pendency of the proceedings against them, that prohibition also is that they be alcohol-free. And anyone who is granted probation or diversion by the Barron Circuit Court not only has to remain drug-free, but also alcohol-free.
And the penalties for not drunk driving, but just being caught and convicted of possessing alcohol.
Well, of course,
it's legal if it's legal.
Exactly.
But, there's no penalty. But if it's abused, in other words, if he's drunk or on the borderline of being drunk and so forth, what's the penalties there?
Well, usually what we see is someone who has committed a crime, maybe it was a minor crime, and they get a shock probation, let's say, after serving 6 months or so. They would have a penitentiary sentence still hanging over their head of 2 to 5 years. If they get caught public drunk, or if they get caught possessing alcohol, even though that is otherwise not even a crime, then we, because they violated a condition of their probation or shock probation by use or abuse of alcohol, then we file a motion in front of the judge, and most often their probation is revoked and they go to the penitentiary.
Now, Karen, getting back to juveniles, what about alcohol among the students in both the high school and the the middle schools?
When I was in the county attorney's office, we had several, I'm sad to say, of cases in that situation, either bringing alcoholic beverages to school in a backpack or in a locker, or in the vehicle in the parking lot, and situations where students would just show up to school under the influence. We do have a what's called a day treatment school, both in Barron County and in Metcalfe County, and I'm sure you're familiar with that and with your work that you do. But sometimes the more troubled students, the students who repetitively get in trouble, who bring alcohol to school or show up high, that there are these day treatment schools. We try to separate those children and not only giving reading, writing, arithmetic, but counseling services to address what appears to be a beginning of an addiction problem on their part. So there are measures in both Barron County and Metcalfe County to try and address that situation.
And getting back to one of my questions about hard drugs, what's the parent's reaction when he or she, a child of theirs, is found to be under the influence or possessing it?
From what I've seen, I would say all across the board. We have had some parents who have stepped up to the plate and taken somewhat responsibility in saying, my child does have a problem, we do need help, and are somewhat thankful that it got stopped at this point before it got a lot worse. You have some parents, I guess you would say, are in denial and are amazed and very defensive to believe that you would ever accuse their child of doing anything. So I would say across the gamut of reaction.
Do you ever inquire, or is there any finding of the use of alcohol in the family
I don't know
by the adults?
I don't know if there has ever been a finding, but I have known myself on several occasions to perhaps ask the probation officers, as Mr. Patton mentioned. These folks have seen many people. Oftentimes, sad to say, they have supervised this person's father or mother, and they are aware of the family's history. And I have found myself asking, does this person have support at home, or are they going back into a home where the home has a drug problem?
One quick final question as an opinion. Is the drug problem genetically? Is it a genetic problem or an environmental problem? Phil?
I have read that there's some genetics, but I haven't become convinced of it. And I'm not a physician, so I don't know.
Do you think it's genetically or environmental or both, Karen?
I would say people may be predisposed genetically from what I've read, but I think the environment still plays a large part.
I thank both of you, Phil Patton, the Commonwealth's attorney, and Karen Davis, his assistant. I think you're both doing a good job, and I think the public needs to know about it. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it, Mr. Barrickman.